Good morning, everyone. This is Jeremiah, and it is Tuesday, March 20th. Here's an update on what I've been doing out in the garden. We're going to start on the east side today and work our way westward. I've been doing a ton of work out here. As you can see, this little pond that we have in the backyard, this is a deliberate design, and you can actually see there's water from here. I was able to channel all the water pouring off the north end of the house through the backyard and down into the southeast corner of the property, where it is able to soak into the clay away from the house, and also what it can't soak in actually spills right over the top and flows down the street into Lake Lavon. But in the meantime, it gives all of this soil lots and lots of water to feed all these plants that we're growing. Starting off here, we have our blueberry blossoms, or our blueberry bushes, of which we actually have 2 of these. If you want blueberry bushes to bear fruit, you have to have 2 different strains so they can cross-pollinate each other. So these 2 bushes, there's one right there, and this one here, will eventually grow to make a natural border along the east end of the garden, but we're hoping to actually have some blueberries this year. Here in this section, I actually used wood from the elm tree that I cut down last year to turn what was 4 rows of root crops into this kind of fun sitting area. I wanted to make something a little bit more aesthetically pleasing and really more of a sensory experience rather than just food production. So I used the logs to create kind of some hills and some shape to the landscape, and then I took all of my herbs that we were growing on the east end of the garden and I dug them up and I planted all of my herbs. I planted all of the microgreens down here. So basically everything that's in this section of this garden, you can either smell, eat, or at minimum look at and enjoy. And where this stone that you see on the ground is actually made out of the sidewalk that ran from this entryway all the way straight here to the curb. I smashed it up last year with a sledgehammer, and then this year I decided to pave with it and set all the stone in the ground, and then I just used that clay dirt underneath it to push in between the cracks, and then I wet it down and it became the cement that actually holds all these stones together. And what's really cool about this particular type of cement is that it's a grow medium, and as you can see, those little green things popping up out of the ground, that's called creeping mother thyme, and that is a ground cover herb that is grown for the express purpose of walking on. So by the end of the summer, it should have spread in between all the cracks of the stone here, and when you walk into the garden, it will release the smell of thyme, and kind of thus starting the sensory experience of being back here. But we have a variety of different herbs: peppermint, spearmint, sage, thyme, rosemary. Those are chamomile plants, and I'm using the oregano actually as a great ground cover, and I've got a couple of different varieties of that planted throughout the garden, and a variety of different seeds that I sprouted that my friends have given to me. So we have some kale planted in here, we have some spinach planted in here. This is all rainbow Swiss chard that was in the microgreen row. It all transplanted just fine. We even have an entire row of cilantro that this stuff cannot die. It is the most resilient plant, and it's all going to seed right now. So we'll be able to harvest seeds off of that. By the end of the summer, this will look like a hedge of cilantro, and it'll smell pretty nice as well. And then the other thing that I put in here are rose bushes, and you can't really see them. There's one on that back hill, but that's actually a clone of the plant that I grew in the front of my house. Then I actually have another clone over here of the antique roses that once grew right next to this tree before I cultivated this whole area. So a lot of interesting stuff that I'm learning about plant propagation. Moving westward, this is our lettuce row. If you've been to Patina Green in the last week, you have seen some of this on their menu. We cannot eat it fast enough, so we were able to harvest and share that with Robert over there. This is a fennel plant here that we planted last year, and I'm actually going to have to pull this up and pot it because it antagonizes plants around it. And this actually starts the food production section of the garden. These 4 rows here have all of our tomatoes and peas in them. We have about 6 different varieties of tomatoes. There are Brandywine, Cherokee Purple, Black Crim, Black Cherry, Pink Ponderosa cherry tomatoes, Yellow Pear tomatoes, and then for companion plants, which companion plants are plants that either enhance the flavor or help attract the good kind of pollinating insects that you want or repel the bad insects away from plants. We actually, in between all these rows, we have snow peas and Amish snap peas that are planted in here, as well as morning glories, which is a flower that will help. It helps make, it actually is a companion plant to a variety of different vegetables, but it'll help attract, again, the right type of pollinating insects and keep away the ones that you don't like, all naturally, so we don't have to use pesticides or herbicides or anything like that. Another plant that we added to every row is the nasturtium, which is an edible flower, edible flowering herb, and we have red and white nasturtiums at the front and end of each row, which you're just going to have to use your imagination for the time being because they are still in the ground, but they'll be popping out soon. This section alone comprises of just about 300 tomato plants, so we're really focusing on ramping up our production this year, given our total lack of production last year, and it should be interesting. I'm very excited to see how this turns out. This corner of hay does not look exciting right now, but in a couple of weeks, this is going to be really awesome. I put down a whole ton of zinnia seeds, and you can see these little sprouts shooting up through the ground. Those are little baby zinnias. So this whole corner of the garden, if you can use your imagination, is going to stand about 4.5 feet tall with just a whole array of different colors of cutting flowers. So that should be nice. Moving westward, these first 4 rows here in this part of the garden contain squash. They contain corn, and I also planted potatoes, which I learned after the fact I shouldn't have done. So we're going to see how they affect. They're supposedly they antagonize squash production, but we'll see how it goes. I have 3 different types of squash planted in here. I have acorn squash, butternut squash, and spaghetti squash, which oddly enough, I got all my spaghetti squash seeds from a spaghetti squash I also purchased at Patina Green, and they sprouted, and they are big, healthy plants, and we should have some good veggies coming up this year, so long as they don't get burnt up if it gets too hot too fast. But also planted throughout here, we have the morning glories and the nasturtiums, which will be popping up soon enough. Moving west, this is our bean row. These are all beans from the stuff that I planted last growing season, so we got to go full life cycle, at least on one crop here. We have Kentucky pole beans and scarlet runner beans planted next to each other, as well as something planted in the middle, I believe jalapenos. And then moving on to this row, we have these are eggplants and bell peppers are planted through here. The eggplants help provide some shade and cover to the pepper plants because they are not as heat tolerant as one would hope them to be. And then over here we have okra and our hot peppers, which are jalapenos, Santa Fe hot peppers, and actually I think that's it for our hots. But we have 2 different types of okra growing. On the south end of the row is burgundy okra. On the north end of the row we have white okra because that plant supposedly gets about 6 feet tall. So that should be interesting. Over here underneath the elm tree we have our cucumber section. So this row, this first row on the right hand side has Market More 76 cucumbers, which are your typical pickling type cucumbers that you would get at a grocery store. In this row we have Dragon Egg cucumbers, which are actually white cucumbers with kind of a light colored flesh. They didn't give off a whole lot last year, but what we did get were absolutely delicious. So I planted a whole lot more of these in the hopes of getting a lot of production out of them. Over here, in between, well, I guess the broccoli is actually sitting in between two rows right now, broccoli and onions, but we have our melon rows. So the first row has honeydew melons on it. The left-hand row has what are called yubari king melons or Japanese cantaloupes. And once these broccoli plants are done flowering, I'll actually cut them down and I'll save the seeds from them, and we'll put a trellis up over these rows so that, much like last year, we'll have a tunnel over which the cucumber or the melon vines will grow. The same for the cucumbers, so it'll be easy to harvest them. And if you look down here just real quick, in between the rows of the garden, you can see the straw we have laid down. This is water that's in here, and again, the purpose of this is for rainwater harvesting. There are no gutters on our house, so I divert the water away from the house in between the rows of the garden, and it floods them, and then once it fills up, it'll just pour over the top of this erosion control guard, and what remains is both the covering, which is the straw, and the water, which sinks into the ground and is stored for the plants to consume later. Over here, getting back to the vegetables, is our root crop row. At the south end, you see these tiny little things here. Those are Detroit red beet sprouts that I sprouted from seed about 4 days ago. Up at the north end of the row, we actually have transplanted Detroit red beets, golden beets, turnips, which I just harvested flowers off of, or harvested seeds off of, as well as garlic and garlic leeks. I'm excited about that. This is the last row of the garden, which last year had all of our herbs growing around it, or growing through it. Those have been transplanted down at the east end, as you saw earlier. What you're seeing here, I actually planted more zinnias, and my hopes are that this whole row would just be another big row of cutting zinnias. It's fun to look at and really pretty. These sprouts coming up are either zinnias or they are parsley. It's one of the two. I sprinkled seeds, parsley seeds, throughout the garden because it's a good companion plant, but I'm hoping some of these are the zinnias seeds that I recovered from our harvest last year. And then moving out of the vegetable area into the rose section, this is our first blossom that I'm waiting to bloom patiently. It's moving slowly but surely. I'm hoping that thing will open up here in the next day or so. And we have a number of other ones that are getting ready to blossom as well. Over here we have our hanging baskets and stuff for the front porch. We have lavender that is flowering. I have some lettuce that I planted, and some rainbow Swiss chard as well. This stuff is doing exceptionally well, and it transplants super easy. Same thing here. I've got a lemon balm plant, a cilantro plant, a snow pea, and a couple of lettuce plants, and just something different to have and to look at on the hanging baskets, because they're green, and while they don't flower a whole lot, they smell really nice, and they're herbs, so they can accent salads, or you can eat them or make teas out of them. A whole bunch of neat stuff. In these baskets, I planted a bunch more zinnia seeds. I'm hoping that's what is sprouting up right here. We should know in about a week if the seeds are going to take or not. Over on this side, these are our rose bushes that I transplanted from the south side of the house. They were nearly dead last year, and they have come back just super voraciously, and I'm excited about getting those blossoms to be a little bit bigger than they were. They were those tiny little teacup blossoms last year. I think they'll be a little bit bigger this season. And then last but not least, this is our blood orange tree, which actually had an orange on it until we plucked it off at the end of January. Did not have any problem with the freezes. As you can see, it has flowered. I really wish there was some way to capture how these things smell and add it to this video, because I could smell this smell all day and I would be okay with that. It is absolutely wonderful. Even if it produced no oranges, if it just produced this smell, I would be happy with this thing as an ornamental plant. It is absolutely wonderful, and I'm hoping to get more than one orange off of it this year. So anyhow, I think that's it for all the stuff that we have going in the garden, and stay tuned for the next update.